Thanks for joining us, all who are just right on time. We appreciate you. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and then folks can kind of join as we go along. So thank you for joining. We are going to be discussing finding income producing opportunities in a low yield world with Mike Zlotnik.
Hi, everyone.
So I wanted to give you kind of a brief about Verivest before we get started with Mike. Mike is actually one of our very first clients. He's been with us a long time, so we appreciate TF Management Group. So Verivest is a real estate investment platform designed to bring trust and transparency to middle market investing. So we are connecting deal sponsors to high net worth investors, shortcutting the time to trust. So here's what our sponsor directory looks like. As you can see, you can search a sponsor by their name. You can search by minimum investment amount. You can search by MSAs. And we also do quarterly checks. So we also do a background checks as well. So anyone who's on our platform has gone through a rigorous process to become Verivest verified. And then also here you can connect with the sponsor directly through our platform. All right, so to be on our platform, the lowest requirements is to have no personal or business bankruptcies, no unfavorably resolved lawsuits, no regulatory sanctions, no felony criminal convictions, and sign the Verivest Code of Conduct. So here is TF Management Group. They are the highest level of transparency. So they are a gold sponsor. They have 100% of their investor capital managed number is right here. So you can see what they're currently in charge of investor capital. And then also they are following the rules of their deals operating agreement. So you know where the money is going. We keep track of that for you. So here is the sponsor track record. So you can see all of his current or past deals that he's been a part of, and the investment amount as well as the dates. So those are all there for you to scroll through. This is a screenshot, so there's plenty of more deals that Mike has been involved with, but this is just kind of a brief overview of his track record. All right, if you would like to connect with me, here is my information as well as the Verivest Community Network. There we will post different events we're having, different educational webinars, different articles. So it's kind of a cool platform to be a part of and connect with other people in the industry. We have Mike Zlotnik here, who is excited to talk to you. He's been in real estate for a long time. He's been since 2000, so what's 21 years looks like, going on 22. He joined Tempo Funding in 2009, and then he assumed the responsibility of CEO in 2014. So he comes with lots of experience, and then he also holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Mike. And then if you guys have questions as the presentation goes along, feel free to drop them in the chat and Mike can answer those at the end for you.
Thank you, Brittany. Before I share, I just wanted to say I'm humbled and honored to be a part of the Verivest community. We've been working with Verivest almost since the beginning of time, since Verivest founding, probably one of the very first clients. And Verivest does all our fund administration, and they do now also tax work, and we greatly appreciate the relationship and love working with Verivest, and we're proud to be Verivest verified gold fund management company. Thank you again, and today we're going to chat a little bit about finding great income producing opportunities in a low yield world. Well, the wonderful disclaimer. We don't give any kind of advice, nor are we offering to sell anything at all. This is for educational purposes only. If you're interested in our family of funds, please request a private placement memorandum. That's the formal offering document to accredited investors only. Past results don't guarantee future performance. And once again, consult with your attorney and CPA professional. Just a couple of words about us. So this is our team. I'm the CEO. Alina leads our investor relations. Yuri N leads our asset management and operations. Yuri N leads the technology, and we have two guys named Yuri. No, not because they're named Yuri. It's just because it happens. So the world happens to take place sometimes, and this what happens. So two guys named Yuri, and then Lilia is office manager, and we have our pets, part of the business. The pets come with the territory. So here's you see my cat Rosie here, and Yuri's dog, and Lilia's cat, and so on. Anyway, why people invest with us? Experience, been real estate investor since 2000, fund manager since 2009 full-time. Real estate is both my passion and something I'm good at. Really love real estate. So it's a combination of all those circles, as they call it, the golden middle. This is what real estate is for me. It's a journey. It's fun, and I try to serve the best I can. As I said, we have a great team, and diversification. So our funds are broadly diversified. We spread the risk among many assets, and we're capital allocators. We have great set of sponsors we invest with. Our funds are funds of funds. So every fund has a specific strategy. We don't directly operate assets. We invest in assets that are operated by third-party operators, third-party sponsors, third-party specialists. So we pick and choose the best of the breed, and we invest and we manage the portfolio. We provide also best access point to the deal flow. Many of our deals not available to public, and some deals that are available to public, we write big checks, and as a result, we negotiate best terms. Quite often improve economics for the investors that go through our funds versus if they went through directly. Business philosophy, our investors comes first. We pride ourselves on white glove service. And we love to be transparent. We're delighted that Verivest is a fund administrator. And that's, we consider this as a massive added bonus. So appreciate that. And we use obviously reputable third-party SEC counsel. We communicate through online portal, emails, statements, Zoom calls, annual meetings, where we appreciate investors. So that's, again, we use a few SEC firms, Verivest, a fund administrator, onboarding platform, now tax filing company as well, Verivest Verified Gold, and we are audited by Armanino LP for Tempo Opportunity Fund. Family of funds, the primary funds, Tempo Income Fund, that's the fund focused on income, obviously. The Tempo Growth Fund, that's the fund focused on growth. And then we have a mixed fund that focused on income and growth, Tempo Opportunity Fund, about 2/3 income, 1/3 growth. Enough of that. Now let's talk about the real subject. So we live in a low yield world, and I'll cover that in just a few minutes. And the next key point is that to get the yield, to find deals that generate strong yield in this environment, you need to follow the principle called the riches in the niches. So often niche opportunities present better risk-adjusted return, better yield, better economics versus going with the masses for the reasons that we'll discuss. The moment the masses follow, the moment the Wall Street drives a lot of capital, they drive yield down because they're solving big money problem. So we'll talk about one of the interesting niches that we invest in, discountloss.com, guys. And before we start working with them, my first requirement before we gave them $1 said, you guys got to get Verivest verified. That was my requirement number one. If you get Verivest verified, we can start talking. Until you do that, let's hold the conversation. So they got Verivest verified, and they're monitored what we do with them through the Verivest platform, which again adds value for obvious reasons. The whole strategy is to buy land for cash and then sell it as receivables, typically on land contracts. So they don't transfer the title. they just enter into the contract that their buyers, the folks that buy land from them, put up a credit card, and then they make monthly payments. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So it's buying land for cash, selling as receivables. Lending on pot farms. And obviously I talk about this figuratively. Cannabis is accepted in most states in the country, not every state, but it is legal. And lending on land that is getting permitted for cultivation is a legal, valid strategy. And we've found a really great operator. We invest in those deals. And because it's a niche deal, can charge substantially higher interest rates and get additional benefits like equity kickers in those transactions. So we'll cover that. Then we'll talk about structuring deals to create outsized cash flow for those folks who want to participate in effectively preferred equity, and create what is known as outsized depreciation for those people or those investors who don't need as much cash flow, but they care about the depreciation. So we'll talk a little bit about deal structuring, how the deals with not very exciting cash flow can look a lot more attractive by the structuring of the deals. So it was an old movie called "It's a Mad, 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 Mad World." Well, we're not talking about Mad, Mad, Mad World. That's a really old movie. We're talking about it's a low yield world out there. And here you could see at the 10-year Treasury rates since 1981. It's been a long time. The rates were much higher, and over time, the yields have gone down and down and down and down. And we slightly bounced up from the bottoms of the COVID crisis last year when the yields were historically low, but they're still very low on the historic basis. And the overall trend continues to be, what I believe, is a low yield environment. Now, we don't know, the yields might bump up, but with the very aggressive spending that the US government is doing, I don't see how these long-term rates can really go up, because the debt service on the US national debt is just going to be out of control. So a long-term trend is sort of towards the Japan model. At least this is my opinion. I don't give advice. I don't have a crystal ball. I used to have it. It broke. Now I can't find another one. But the chances are that US, as it continues to grow and debt to GDP ratio continues to increase, its path is towards lower and lower rates, possibly negative rates, because the debt service is just eating greater and greater portion of the budget. So again, this is a theory. There could be many different interpretations, but today we're dealing with low yield world. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunities, the riches and the niches. When big dollars go into mainstream opportunities, they drive yield down. And this has been, let's use an example of hard money loans. So in the hard money space, a number of years ago, the yields were much higher. What happened? Well, Wall Street figured out, wait a minute, we can now drive a ton of capital. A number of big firms popped up. Give you an example, Genesis Capital popped up, and then Goldman Sachs bought them. And they enabled the firm with almost an unlimited checkbook to write bigger and bigger checks and then turn them into bonds and sell on Wall Street. That's wonderful for the Wall Street. The problem is for smaller operators, it's getting a lot more competitive, and the return on investment and the risk-adjusted return has gone down quite a bit. So to compete in the hard money space in volume, it's a very difficult proposition for most smaller operators. Many commercial real estate cap rates have compressed due to the lower and lower cash and cash return requirements from the Wall Street capital chasing those deals. Insurance companies, large investment banks, and other banks all looking for yield. So this is an example of big money chasing deals and how it has driven the yields down. So what's left are the niche opportunities that present higher yield, but require more careful deal selections, more careful sponsor selections, better underwriting. So we'll jump into a few examples. Discount lots. So these two guys, they're young, smart, sharp cats. I met them through one of my masterminds I go to called the Collective Genius Mastermind. As cheesy as it sounds, it's a great mastermind of movers and shakers around the country, guys who do deals. And they needed expansion capital because what they do is they buy land for cash, often $3,000 to $6,000. The prices have gone up, obviously, recently. So it's probably more like 5 to 10, but conceptually, this has been the kind of the primary product that buy rural land, not big city, and then sell it on seller financing to buyers who basically get the use of the land, but they don't get the title of the land. They have a land contract. On the contract, they can use the land as if they owned it as long as they pay. And they go on a payment plan, and quite often they pay 5-6 times the price that these guys bought it for cash. The spreads are massive. And this is an old business, it's not necessarily new. What they've done is they've brought technology and brilliant marketing into play, and they've been very successful finding these great lots and then selling them to folks on seller financing. And you're gonna ask me, what do people do with these rural lots in the middle of nowhere, in the boonies? Well, what they do, depending on what they need. Some folks like to go shoot their guns. Some folks like to build a camp. Some folks, I don't know, they build a bomb shelter. I don't know, whatever drives their whatever sweetens their heart, whatever they want to do. But plenty of people want to own a piece of land, and they can't buy land in the city, so they go in the boonies and they buy land, and they pay on a credit card. And what's really interesting is that the more payments they make, the higher propensity to pay, because they feel like as if they walk away, they're going to lose all the money they've already paid. So it creates really interesting data that the propensity of people to pay depends on how long they've been paying. And typically people get very sticky after they made a number of payments. So this is a massive receivables business, and the land doesn't depreciate. It's both receivables and then there's land as collateral. So we loan the money to the discount lots through SPEs, special purpose entities, at pretty high interest rate, 18%. Where can you get 18% today? It's a high yield. And if you want to do hard money loan, it's 7-8% from Genesis. So it's very, very competitive in one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, if you have relationship driven lending and it's monitored, we believe it's a very good product. For them, it's a lot easier than raising capital from a bunch of individual investors. They go to us, they request a draw when they have new land to acquire. And as a result, they get fast access to capital. We're easy, we're comfortable. They're not as sensitive to the interest rate, even though it's 18%. The effective rate of return on their deployed capital is around 54-56%, including all the costs, because how this stuff works. So that's the product. It's the riches and niches. It's 18%. We're able to charge that kind of interest because it's a niche product. Whether the stuff is bankable by traditional receivables companies, they've been able to obtain some loans in one-off situations with a few community banks, and some of their business expanded that way. But also they use us as a way to grow their portfolio, and over time they can refinance, and they've done it in the past if they can get some bank products at a lower cost of capital. But it does work for us. There's a few other interesting uses for the land. Some folks have been interested in camping, and they've talked about erecting some camping structures and use them as an Airbnb for basically camping. And also they flip some lots for cash, which is absolutely acceptable. And Verivest monitors the line. And then what we do in turn within our family of funds, we offer our investors in Tempo Income Fund, we call them discount lots units D1 through D4, essentially a high yield product linked to this line. So folks that invest, and it's a function of how much capital people invest. So if they invest $500,000, they get 12%. If they invest 750, they get 13%. If they get a million, they get 14%, and 2.5, they get 15% interest rate. So it's we pay out pretty substantial portion of what we collect, but the fund does keep a little bit of arbitrage as part of the strategy. So this is an example of a high yield investment for folks to consider. Again, not soliciting, just giving an example what still generates high yield, and we believe it's a great ongoing relationship for us and for investors. So why do we like to deal with discount lots? So discount lots are Verivest verified. Verivest is monitoring the compliance with the terms of a line of credit. 18% yield under the line of credit is attractive on risk-adjusted basis to the Tempo Income Fund. We have the collateral in the form of pledge and assignment of all the beneficial interest in the entity that owns all the lots. And then they have very strong debt service coverage ratio. Essentially, an example, when they buy a lot for $3,000, they sell it for $18,000, payable at $250 a month. In the first year, they collect essentially $3,000, 100% of what it cost them. So the debt service coverage ratio is almost 5x, which is really high. So they can easily service our debt. And they're sharp guys. They're part of the mastermind, and we know, like, and trust them. Lending on pot farms. Let's chat a little bit about that. So again, depending where you go in the country, cannabis is a norm. And we have a relationship with a longtime friend, longtime business associate. He's actually an investor with us in our family of funds. His whole family is invested with us. And we investing with him. We've been doing business for a long time. What he does is he's become a specialist in acquiring land and getting it permitted for cultivation in the Lake County, California. California is obviously very friendly state for cultivation, and but he doesn't grow. He's not a grower. His whole play is to buy land and use his relationship he's developed with consultants, with specialists who are able to drive these projects through the approval process. And that's what he does. And these deals are very attractive because we're still able to charge strong points and fees, record a lien on the property, and also generate an equity kicker based on a relationship. We get an additional compensation for family of funds in the form of the equity kicker. What's really amazing, some of the deals, the equity kicker is worth all the interest and all the points combined. It's worth a lot more than that, because some of these deals, you could take a piece of land and be all in $2.5–3 million, and then get it permitted for cultivation, and that property could be worth $8.5–9 million. So that whole process increases the value substantially, and an equity kicker is worth more than the points and interest. But for us, we still want to be a lender on the deal because it's safer. We have a lien. We're not participating as an equity player other than the equity kicker. So that's kind of the play. And we've done deals in the first lien, charging 3 points, 12% rate, and getting an equity kicker anywhere from 5 to 20%. And some deals we've done second lien loans, where the first lien is that big lender with cheap first lien mortgage will come in second for a small amount of money and charge a much higher yield, and also get an equity kicker. So that's kind of how we've done these deals, and love working with this particular operator. Now, if you're going to ask me, is this a product? The answer is no. It's a relationship. We don't do this stuff with the strangers. If you're going to reach out to me, oh, I got a wonderful piece of land, I want to get permitted for cultivation. If I don't know you, I don't trust you, we're not going to enter into that relationship. So it's niche operators, long-standing relationship, getting very comfortable with the specialist and working out the terms that are mutually happy. They work for everyone, and the key is building trust. Is a typically not a fast business. So at this point, we choose to work with the right sponsors and operators, because these niche opportunities require a higher degree of trust, as this is not a product. If the process fails, then this land has limited uses. So from our perspective, we want to invest with a very, very competent, trusted operator we feel very comfortable investing with. Deal structuring to increase the cash flow for some investors while giving extra depreciation to others. Now, this has been a really fun journey, and we've seen a number of deals last year, a number of deals this year were structured with this approach. And there are three primary flavors. And how does the subject fall into this finding yield? Well, you're finding yield by structuring deals in a way that some folks get a lot more yield and some folks get a lot more depreciation. And the reason it's important is because there are different needs. So there are three primary flavors. There's a preferred equity versus common equity flavor. And again, if you look at the capital stack picture on the right, typically senior debt is the bank loan, and that's what is the most senior on the capital stack. And then instead of bringing in all equity as a one common equity chunk, it can be structured as a preferred equity or a common equity. Another way to do it is a little different. It's called Class A versus Class B common equity, with Class A having seniority on the cash flow and return of capital, and Class B having extra depreciation. The concepts are very similar. And a third methodology in this is a mezzanine debt versus common equity. And a mezzanine debt is where you can clip a lot of coupon and feel relatively safe with substantial common equity behind. So let me go through a few examples. So where does it start? It starts with really basic. There are different folks, and there are different strokes for different folks. It's as simple as that. Needs differ. And instead of putting everyone into the one same bucket, common equity, by separating preferred and common, by separating cash flow and depreciation, by creating better satisfaction between different investors. So some folks need greater cash flow and greater safety. And they want to see more cash flow than the project naturally supports. I will show you an example of what happens. So somebody has 10% requirement and the project naturally supports only 6%. It becomes a mismatch without creative financial engineering. On the other side, you have folks who need extra depreciation. And who are these people? Who needs this depreciation? Well, apparently a lot of people need them. So real estate professionals absolutely need depreciation because they generate substantial income, and depreciation becomes a shield against tax liabilities, perfectly legal. And real estate professionals crave depreciation to the nth degree, especially at the end of the year. I know a number of folks in the Collective Genius Mastermind who are all over me. Find me deals with extra depreciation. So that is what helps them shield taxes. There's also a very substantial bucket of folks that are not real estate professionals, but they have a need. They sold an appreciated property. And as a result of a sale, what they've got is passive investment gains, pigs. They got a whole bunch of pigs. And then what do they need to offset the pigs? They need passive allocation losses. These are pals. So pigs need the pals and pals need the pigs. As funny as it sounds, that's exactly what needs to happen in the world of passive real estate investing. So folks with appreciated property sales have an urgent need. Find me a deal, a set of deals where I could get outside depreciation. Those two groups drive the demand for the deals with outside depreciation. So let's look at kind of compare two deals, the common equity deals versus preferred plus common equity deals. So in the common equity deal, orange is your cash flow and apple is your depreciation. So all investors pari passu to each other get their portion of the orange and their portion of the apple, their portion of the cash flow, and their portion of depreciation. And typically it's proportional to the amount of capital they invested into the equity pool. That's a typical common equity scenario. In a preferred versus common equity or Class A, Class B scenario, things change. A lot of oranges go to one group of people who needs cash flow, and a lot of apples, which is depreciation, go to the other group. And that's what we're going to talk about. It's a very powerful concept, very simple concept. It does require structuring, it does require thought process, but if it's done properly, it becomes a very attractive offering to both groups of people, those who want oranges and those who want apples. So here's an example. Again, this is a hypothetical deal, but we've invested in a deal with sort of very similar economics. Just for sake of confidentiality, we're going to keep this as a pure mathematical hypothetical scenario. So in a multifamily syndication, for the sake of a discussion, it's a $30 million total equity raise and $30 million debt, $100 million asset, just for sake of a discussion. And to structure the deal, depending on obviously preferred equity providers versus common equity, we've seen this ratio where preferred equity that is interested in the deal will take roughly 60% of the total equity stack, and they'll provide $18 million, which is 60% of the 30 million. And then the common equity will have to raise $12 million. So in that scenario, if you take a natural deal that generates just cash on cash 6%, just for sake of the argument, from day one, the deal naturally, without any bifurcation between cash flow and depreciation, generates cash on cash 6%. So $1.8 million a year on $3 million equity equals 6% a year. Now let's look at this same situation is when you bifurcate the cash flow and depreciation. So preferred equity investors would receive a 10% preferred return and 25% of the equity upside in the deal. They're senior on a capital stack. They get their Pref first, and they get enough upside on the back end to make it attractive for them, and they feel safe because they are senior to the common equity. So that is scenario sufficiently common, and it is an acceptable institutional level setup where preferred investors will go for this type of a setup if they have sufficient common equity behind them. So Pref, 10% Pref on $18 million preferred equity is $1.8 million a year. So all the cash flows in this particular example, at 1.8 million, goes to the preferred equity. So it increases their cash flows, it meets their requirements, they're happy. Now, what happens with the common equity? Well, they got no cash flow, but that's the price they had to pay for the depreciation. And if the deal is structured properly, where preferred equity is almost viewed as debt, they could get 0% depreciation, and the common equity would get 100% depreciation. So now let's look at this deal. What the benefit for the common equity? Why are they doing this? Well, they run a cost segregation study. Typically, bonus depreciation, it varies, is about 30% of the acquisition price. And again, this is bonus depreciation. This is not long traditional depreciation. We've seen this again and again with the bonus depreciation. We've seen deals easily reaching approximately 30% of the purchase price through the bonus depreciation in the first year. So it's $30 million bonus depreciation on $100 million purchase. So the common equity investors receiving $30 million in depreciation, and they invested $12 million of common equity. That turns out to be 2.5x. So every dollar of investment in common equity is generating first year $2.5 worth of depreciation. It's a loss. So why do they do this? Well, think a little bit about this. So every $100,000 generates $250,000 worth of losses. If the investors are in 40% tax bracket, they get $250,000 deduction. They save on taxes $100,000 in the current year. It's a deferral. It's not a permanent deduction. It's a deferral until the asset sells. But to many investors, it's worth it because they basically pay for the investment in the first year. Whatever check they write, the tax savings cover that immediately. So to them, as the deal goes through its life cycle, the deal can generate strong returns. Obviously, the whole thing starts with a great deal. You don't want to put lipstick on a pig. If the deal is terrible, this financial engineering will only make things worse. But if it's a strong deal, this financial engineering could give stronger cash flow to the preferred equity investors and strong depreciation to the common equity investors, which and that will make it attractive to them because of a tax savings. And over time, as the deal economics improve, the value strategy is executed, the cash flows will start coming in and they'll start generating yield for the common equity as well. But initially, the common equity will have to live without any yield, but they get the tax savings sufficient to cover the investment as kind of a compensation for foregoing the cash flow. So this trade-off is a very powerful idea. And for many investors, they would rather own a piece of real estate and get the appreciation and the upside than pay a whole bunch of money in taxes today and deal with what's left over and invest the leftover money. They would rather invest the entire money, entire capital working for them in a tax-deferred manner. So this is an example of serving the need of depreciation, and on the other side, serving the need of greater cash flow for those folks who are participating in a preferred equity. So if you are a high yield investor, if you don't care about depreciation, this preferred equity is a lot more attractive for you. This is what creates a higher yield versus if you invested in the deal receiving only 6%. You're receiving 10, it's a better setup, it's a safer investment. So from many angles, it serves better needs for those who need the cash flow, and it serves better needs for those who need depreciation. Again, what are the benefits of preferred equity? Receive 10% yield instead of 6% if it was structured only as a common equity. And the preferred equity is safer because it's senior to the common equity on the capital stack. On the other side, the common equity investors receive outsized depreciation. In this example, 2.5 times X for every dollar invested, and that saves them a lot on taxes. And the common equity investors could also make somewhat higher IRR or return on investment because of the structure. Typically, common equity capture greater upside. As you remember on a previous slide, preferred equity only was capturing 25% of the upside, while common equity is capturing 75%. So the common equity could generate stronger return. They get the depreciation, they are taking higher risk. That's the price to pay. Now let's talk about mezzanine debt versus a common equity scenario. We're going to use another example. This is sort of a live deal that we just completed without giving any names. It's a smaller deal, but we'll give you sort of the explanation how Mezz debt could be used versus the preferred equity. So this is a value-add multifamily project with a natural cash flow starting very low. It starts first year only 1.5%, second year it goes to 7.5%. And then after value-add is executed, the year 3 plus, it is 14% cash on cash return. So the total equity needed in this deal was $4 million. And the way it was structured is $3 million came in as a mezzanine debt with a high yield, 12% yield coupon, plus the deal was structured to give the Mezz debt investors 50% equity kicker, essentially 50% of the upside, generating total return between 12% yield and and then the equity kicker, taking them all the way to 15 to 16% IRR. And it's safe for investment. Why? Because the common equity is behind them. So this is very attractive for the Mezz debt investors. Not only 12% yield, but it's substantial equity kicker that can take them up another 3-4% on the return. On the other side, the investors who put their capital in the common equity, they also committed to service the debt on the Mezz debt. The reason it's important is because debt has to be paid. Preferred equity could be underpaid and deferred. Typically, debt has to be paid. So the common equity investors essentially needed to bring another $500,000 of extra capital to service the debt on Mezz debt. Why would they want to do that? Well, what's really interesting here is that the project natural depreciation falling on the $4 million through the COSEC study was $3.8 million. And it was applicable to effectively $1 million common equity plus the $500,000 of reserves to service the debt. So that ratio is approximately 2.53x for every dollar of the investment. So same story, common equity investors essentially getting enough tax benefits in the form of depreciation to generate tax savings that immediately cover the entire investment. Once again, the 3.8 million depreciation, the tax savings should be at least $1.5 million for high income investors. That structure makes total sense to both parties. The Mezz debt investors love the yield and love the upside, and they feel safer. And then the common equity investors got the massive depreciation benefits through COSEC study, and they have essentially also substantial upside as the deal is structured, that they're receiving Pref and 50% of the upside. They put up only quarter of the actual capital in the 4 million. They only put in $1 million with 500,000 additional contribution, but the upside is to capture 50% of the upside once they receive 12% Pref. So the economics, if the deal does well, also accelerate. They take in high degree of risk, but at the same time, because of depreciation benefits, they get an immediate payoff in the first year in the form of tax savings. It works for real estate professionals or those who solving that passive allocation gains versus passive allocation gains versus passive investment losses. Sorry, passive investment gains, PIGs, versus passive allocation losses, PALs. That's it. And so what are your needs? That's the big question. When you are thinking about the exercise, do you prefer greater cash flow and higher safety of the capital? Or are you a real estate professional or someone with passive investment gains, PIGs, and you need the PALs and you're willing to pay for it? And that's basically what happens with these bifurcated deals. You can create yield and you can create depreciation as a benefit to those who need it. Here is Alina and me. This is how you can reach out. And if you have any questions, let's open it. Let's open the floor to Q&A. And I'm happy to answer follow-up question. Again, I'm not a CPA. I don't play one on TV. I don't give advice, but I coach. Happy to, under the coaching platform, have a conversation on this front if you have questions, how to structure these deals or anything else.
Thank you so much, Mike, for all your expertise today. It looks like we have a group of people on with us. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or into the chat. And Mike can answer those for you. It helps that you have a degree in math in this industry, huh? I was looking at that slide. I was like, that's great. You've got all that background in mathematics that probably help you succeed in your work.
Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, I'm a mathematician and a finance guy. I love that field. Finance and mathematics it's kind of what I do. Really, what they call it, find your genius zone, and that's. I know the slides were a little bit crowded, a little bit too much information. This would not work if this was a live event. The crowded slides are terrible. On a virtual event, on a Zoom, you can get away with that. But I hope people like the slides with apples and oranges. That's kind of my favorite slides because I do want to make sure it's explained in the terms most folks can understand versus complex transactions with a lot of numbers and going, whatever direction.
You guys have Mike's info and Alina's info there. If there are no questions, we will conclude. And thank you again for joining us, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great evening.
Yes, take care.